Let's start with Philip Bump, Washington Post columnist. And Philip, I read there was panic among a lot of Democrats last night during the debate. 24 hours later, what do you think the mood is?
Well, I think that the panic has abated only slightly, right, in the way that, when you're startled severely, it takes a while to wear off. There's been a lot of concern, primarily because this was understood to be one of Joe Biden's most significant weaknesses, this idea that people viewed him as old. And it was one of the few chances that he had to speak to a large audience, demonstrate that he wasn't. And of course, the opposite occurred. There are a lot of, obviously, sober minds reminding folks, look, we have to see what happens with the polls. We have to see if this has an effect. Viewership was down relative to 2020. There are all these ways in which this may not be the disaster that it seemed like last night, but that too takes some time to resolve. We don't know yet if this is going to be something that negatively affects his poll numbers. It may be. And so a lot of people are on tenterhooks waiting to see what happens, but with a very strong sense that this went about as badly as it could have.
Let's go to the CBC's Alex Panetta in Washington. Alex, some prominent Democrats voiced their support for the president.
Listen, people can debate on style points, but ultimately this election and who is the president of the United States has to be about substance. And the contrast is clear.
You don't turn your back because of one performance. What kind of party does that?
So, Alex, what should we make of the words of support?
Yeah, well, I mean, there are a lot of Democrats in this country who would be happy to replace their nominee with someone younger and more dynamic. But I want to talk about the difference between desiring something and acting on it. Democrats, many Democrats, maybe a third or more, depending on the polls you look at, would love to see someone replace Biden. Just as an example, just personal anecdote. This morning, I was on my way to work, walked past a neighbor's house, a local Democrat, quite active, and I saw him this morning, and he made a slitting motion across his throat, basically to convey the message, we're dead in November, based on what he saw last night in the debate. But you're not seeing that desire translate into a critical mass yet of action, into this tipping point. We just heard from a couple of Democrats who remain supportive of the president. Probably the most important vote of confidence today came from Barack Obama, who's remains the most popular member within that party, who expressed confidence and tweeted a link to a fundraising page for Biden's campaign, and reminded people that he had a bad debate in 2012 too. So he might be nervous. All Democrats might be a little nervous after that debacle yesterday, but it doesn't look like they're ousting him.
Philip, for our Canadian audience not familiar with the process in the United States, when you have a presumptive nominee, particularly a sitting president, is there a mechanism to get him to step aside? And if so, what would that look like?
Well, there isn't really a formal mechanism to try and get someone out of that position. There certainly are rules that are in place that the party has adopted in order, should he, for example, be abducted by space aliens. They have a process in place at various stages in order to actually replace the nominee. I think it's important to remember, this is a party process. The party can do whatever it wants to do, right? There's been a lot of discussion about what the rules are. The party sets those rules. They can go into a meeting of the rules committee. They can change the rules, and they can make the rules be whatever they want to be. So there are a lot of ways that this could go down. I think the fundamental question that hangs over a lot of this right now is, is Joe Biden going to choose to stand aside, which makes it obviously much, much easier. And I think that would be, if Joe Biden ends up not being the nominee, that would be the process by which it happens. But the second is, how do they avoid the sort of giant fight that gives opportunity to all those Democrats who are champing at the bit? Yes, there are a lot of Democrats who would love to be the nominee, but they don't want to go through a gigantic fight in which people are sniping at one another, and they basically erode Democratic support for whoever comes out of that. So those are the things that the party is considering. They're very nervous about Joe Biden. They would love if there was some magic thing that occurred where all of a sudden there was an extremely popular person who became the nominee instead, but that's not going to happen. And so it's just a lot of people saying, let's see what happens over the next week or two, and then playing it by ear from there.
And Alex, we have about a minute left. What do you think is going to happen over the next week or two, or what are you looking for?
Yeah, what I'll be looking for is, first of all, the polls and the reaction to the polls. What's very important to remember is the people who watch that debate are primarily extremely engaged Americans, people who care a lot about politics. And people who care a lot about politics overwhelmingly have their minds made up. What'll be interesting to see is whether that critical cohort of Americans, people who don't care that much about politics, who were not watching the debate, how they react. And their reaction will, in part, be based on upon what they hear from people who have watched it, like us, and what they see in social media in terms of clips. And, know, if the polls get even worse for Biden, then you might start seeing a real panic. But I don't think there's an easy way out for Democrats. You know, whether you stick with the president or you replace him with someone like Kamala Harris, who's potentially even less popular than Biden, or if you bypass Harris at the convention and go with someone like Gretchen Whitmer, who's popular in her swing state of Michigan, but then you might be accused of disrespecting an African-American woman who would have been the backup plan in ordinary times to the president. It's a messy outcome no matter what happens. And last night made the world a whole lot messier for Democrats entering the general election season.
Philip, I have 15 seconds. Maybe this isn't fair, but I'll ask you, do you think Joe Biden will be on the ballot in November?
At this point, I do, yeah.
All right. Nice, quick answer. Philip Bump, Alex Panetta, thank you.
Thank you.